A very good morning to everyone and welcome back to my channel, which is Teacher Cool, and we are here again, but this time we are covering the syllabus of A level and AS level of foreign boards. But let me just tell you, this syllabus or these videos are not just for those who are pursuing the foreign boards, but these are conceptual topics which may come in your competitive exams. Or you can say India की books के अंदर भी these topics are covered, but to a deeper extent, but basic understanding remains the same. So in a way, these topics we are covering three targets. One is foreign boards, one is competitive exams, and one is basics for Indian education. So there is no point of leaving these videos. So whatever you are pursuing, whether you are going for government jobs or you are going for competitive jobs or exams, just go through these videos and you are good to go and appear for any exam, right? So let's start without wasting any further time. So we'll be doing, we'll start with the basics, and slowly we'll go over the, you can say, more and more important topics. And also, since these topics are sort of understanding topics, there is nothing much to cram about it. Once you understand them, you are good to go, and you don't need to, cram about these topics. So that's why I have not written very much theory about these topics. I've just written the names which we'll be covering in this video. I'll explain, I'll give you the complete story about these videos, and once you watch these videos or you go through these topics, it's all set. These are very easy topics. I am telling you right in the beginning, these topics are very easy. All you need is the basic understanding of these topics. So let's just start without wasting any time further. Our first topic is atom. Now everyone knows कि कोई भी जो solid material है, it is made up of, you can say, I'll say any solid is made up of elements plus compounds. Up till the stage everyone knows about it. Now elements and compounds are made up of atoms. You can say atom is the smallest particle of which any substance is made up of, right? So we are talking about atoms here. What will be the size of this atom? This atom will be of the size of 1/1,000,000th of a millimeter. I'll say millimeter divided by 1,000,000. This is the size of the atom. So obviously you cannot see them or observe them with your naked eyes. You need electron microscopes to observe them. Now what is atom made up of? Obviously atom is also made up of something, which is our key topic today, right? So I'll say, when someone or some scientist observed atoms, this was a new beginning. Why? Because every scientist was interested in finding the internal structure of this atom. Now this atom here is supposed to be a very tiny particle or a dot-like structure. So how to study it or how to observe its internal structure? So what scientists did is, they took some particles, very small particles like electrons or some other particles, and they just bombarded it. Charged particles they used, and they bombarded this atom with these particles, and what they observed is, many of these particles went through this atom undeviated, whereas when these particles were right near to the center of the atom, they were deviated highly to many directions, and to much surprise, one or two beams were directed backwards. That means they were, they just went and they collided with something and they just strike back. So this thing showed that atom, suppose if this is the atom, then they said, since many of the beams were passing undeviated, that means much space of the atom was empty, right? Empty. Now, when the beams were passing very close to the center of the atom, they were deviated, and right into the middle, they just went backwards. So that means there is something which is very heavy and has a high density is located at the center of this atom. So the center was known as the nucleus, right? So this was the observation that most of the atom is empty, and the middle part, which was known as the nucleus, it was very heavy and it has a very high density. So this was the primary structure, and this structure was discovered by Rutherford. So that is why we say Rutherford model. So according to Rutherford model, if I show you again, so what was the final structure drawn by Rutherford to explain the internal structure of atom was, he said the middle part is the nucleus, right, which has a large number of smaller particles, and there are orbits around it in which electrons were present. Why? Because when the beams were passing, a few were deflected towards many directions. So these beams might have collided with these electrons which were revolving around the atom, right, this way, and it showed the Bohr's atomic model. Now he also said that since atom here is electrically neutral, the overall atom which was studied by these scientists, they were observed to be electrically neutral. So that means, since we know the electrons are negatively charged, I say negatively charged, and we have suppose n number of electrons, but overall this atom appears to be electrically neutral. That means there must be some positively charged particles inside the nucleus, because outside there are only electrons. So we say there must be some positive charged particles inside the nucleus carrying the similar charge but of opposite parity. If this was negative, this will be positive, and we call these particles as protons, right? Also, it was said that the number of electrons and the number of protons were same to make this atom electrically neutral. So this was the first observation. Then the next observation, or you can say deduction from the observations. And now what they did is, they knew that we have an atom in which electrons are revolving around the nucleus, and we have positive charged particles which are equal in number to electrons inside the nucleus. But when they studied about the mass of the atom, when it was calculated, it came out to be approximately half of what it should be. So they said, why is it half? Because total mass was calculated with mass of protons plus mass of electrons, and it came out to be half of what it should be. So where is the difficulty, or where is the discrepancy? They said that when we further studied about these particles, it came out that mass of electron, which is around 9.1 into 10 to power minus 31 kg, and mass of proton came out to be 1.6 into 10 to power minus 27 kg. You can very well see that mass of electron is 10 to power minus 31, that is 1 by 10,000th time of mass of proton. So there was no point of adding this mass of electron to calculate the entire mass of atom. Also, it led that mass of proton is half. Atom should be electrically neutral, so there must be some particles known as the neutrons which should be electrically neutral and they should contribute to mass, and this contribution should be equal to the mass of protons, right? So instead of mass of electrons, there came mass of neutrons, and it ended the discrepancy. So we got the entire mass of the atom. So this was the Rutherford model कि he bombarded the atom with charged particles. Few were deflected, few went undeflected, and few came right back. So according to it, there must be a nucleus with carrying a large number of particles and electrons revolving around this nucleus, and these electrons turned out to be moving in elliptical orbits around the nucleus. So now we have the internal structure of atom. We know about electrons. These particles have much less of mass, but they carry a negative charge, and this negative charge का जितना content है, the same amount of positive charge is being carried by protons, which are present inside the nucleus, and they contribute approximately half of the atomic mass, right? And then we have the neutrons, which are neutral in nature, but they contribute towards the mass, which is equal to the mass of proton, and hence we get the total atomic mass. So from here, if I write again, I can write atomic mass of the atom is number of protons plus number of neutrons, right? Clear? And if you ask, it is the number of protons and neutrons. Let me make it clear. When they ask about atomic weight, at that time you have to multiply this weight with this mass and turn it into kg. But when I am asking atomic mass, it is the number of protons plus number of neutrons. For example, in case of helium, hydrogen helium in the periodic table, we say since it is at the number 2. How is it at number 2? That means around this helium atom we have 2 electrons. So that means I'll say atomic number is equals to number of electrons, and this is denoted by Z. So atomic number of helium is 2 because it has 2 electrons, right? So we get the concept of atomic number denoted by Z, and this atomic mass is denoted by capital A, right? Now what will be the atomic mass? Atomic mass of helium will be, since it has 2 electrons, that means number of protons will be 2 plus, also जो protons हैं they contribute half, so that means number of neutrons should also be equal to number of protons. So we say 2 plus 2 is equals to 4, so that means this is equals to A. Now whenever I am writing an atom or some element, we write it in the case in a way that we say, suppose X is my element, I'll write A over here and Z over here, right? Where A denotes my atomic mass and Z denotes my atomic number, right? So in case of helium, it will be helium 4 and 2. Clear? Is it clear? So we have done Rutherford model, then nucleons. Now what is nucleons? Nucleons is nothing but the collective name of neutrons and protons. Whatever is present inside this nucleus is known as nucleons, right? So we have done nucleons, we have done atomic number, we have done mass number. Now what is the charge of this electron? We are saying this electron is negatively charged. So what will be the charge? We are just telling Z is the number of electrons, right? But we say that one electron carries a charge of 1.6 into 10 to power minus 19 coulombs, right? When I am saying helium, right, helium has 2 electrons, that means helium can give or take, not take, but helium can give 2 electrons. If suppose he gives out 2 electrons to someone, or someone borrows 2 electrons from this, we'll say that the charge of helium will be 2 positive. Why? Since electron is negatively charged, right? I have a number which is 0 and I subtract minus 2 from it. 0 minus 2. So I get plus 2. So the same way, when I remove 2 electrons from helium, that means the overall charge over this helium ion, since it is converted to ion, ion is atom having some charge, we say the total charge will be 3.2 into 10 to power minus 19 coulombs. Clear hai? So this is the charge and we represent it in terms of coulombs. Clear? Also, one more thing I would like to tell you here, when I am talking about that helium is giving out 2 electrons or hydrogen is giving out 1 electron, what is it? It is the bonding, which is a very big topic in itself, but I'll give you a basic idea about it. Now, suppose I have to make a compound, I'll say potassium chloride, right? So overall we say that potassium has 19 electrons in total. So electronic configuration will be 2881. So these numbers are basically KLMN. So these orbitals, according to their concentricity, we have named the innermost orbital is K, then it is L, this is M. So KLMNO, it goes like this, and in these orbitals the maximum number of electrons is K can carry only 2 electrons. L can carry 8 electrons and then it increases. Why? The reason being the next topic, which is strong nuclear force, which I'll tell you in a few minutes. So basically this is the number of electrons allowed in these orbitals. So it says that since potassium has only 1 electron in its outermost shell, so it can very easily give out this electron, whereas chlorine has 17 electrons. So that means 2, 8, 7. Now you see 8 यहाँ पर complete है, octet we call it. यहाँ पर एक एक्स्ट्रा है so that it come back to 8. जिस भी एलिमेंट के लास्ट में 8 आता है for your level, it becomes a stable. That means it will not react now. A stable atom means a stable ion or a stable nuclei means that now it is not interested in talking to anyone. He is happy in himself. Just leave him alone. Right? So this will be the layman language. Whereas जो chlorine है, it has 2, 8, 7 and to complete its 8, he needs 1 electron. So this 1 electron will come from here to here. Right? So I'll say since potassium is giving out 1 electron, I'll get plus 1. Whereas chlorine is taking 1 negative charge, it will become 1 negative. And they'll exchange this electron and they'll form a KCl compound, right? Whereas if you ask what will be the formula for MgCl2, magnesium chloride, when we are forming, why this 2 comes when it is not coming over here is because magnesium has 12, right? Magnesium is 12. So it gets 282 and there is nothing here, whereas chloride is this thing, right? So that means magnesium can give out 2 electrons to come back to 8, whereas chlorine can take only 1. So to stabilize this magnesium ion, we need 2 chlorine atoms so that magnesium gives 1 electron to this chlorine and gives 1 electron to this chlorine, and together it forms the MgCl2. So this way these ions, they form a compound and they get stabilized, right? So So this is stabilizing. Suppose potassium is male, chlorine is female. Potassium had some qualities, chlorine has some qualities, and they were not interested in the world, and when they came together they just combined, they married each other, and now they have no interest in having a fling or an affair with anyone else. So that way they lead a very happy, married, stable life. Same way magnesium, which has 2 wives, you can say, and this they get stabilized, right? But when I'm talking about a stable nuclei, this is stable compound. When I'm talking about a stable nuclei, that means the atom itself is electrically neutral. That means, for example, argon, krypton, xenon, radon. These elements of the group 18 elements up, you can say these are group 18 elements of periodic table. They all have already 2 8 ऐसे करके they already have the complete octet, so they don't want to get married to anyone in this world. They are happy on their own, so these are the happy bachelors. They are never interested in anyone. So this kind of a nuclei is known as a stable nuclei, right? So basic is, whenever we are adding the word stable in front of anything, that means it is not going to react, it is not going to decay, it is not going to disintegrate into some other particles, right? Because suppose uranium has a high number of, uranium ka atomic number is 92, you can understand it has a very high number of electrons, so it is highly unstable. So what it does is it just disintegrates itself into a number of particles, which I'll let you know further. So it just breaks down into smaller elements or nuclei. So this is unstable one, right? So we are done with charges, masses, number of electrons. Now comes the isotopes. What are isotopes? Now isotopes is basically, we are saying that we have an atom where it should be electrically neutral. For being electrically neutral, this atom should be such that number of electrons should be equal to number of protons, which we cannot change. And to conserve the mass, the number of protons should be equal to number of neutrons, right? So that means every time the atomic mass should be a even number, but we have a few elements where they show that atomic number A are also odd numbers. So what is the possibility of having odd number atomic mass? Is either the number of protons is more than number of neutrons, or number of neutrons is more than number of protons. But when I say number of protons ko we are increasing, that means we need to change the number of electrons also, because we cannot change this thing. So the only way is, in this case, the number of protons is not equals to number of neutrons, and we have the different number of neutrons. Either they are less than number of protons or they are more than number of protons, right? But we cannot change this thing, neither the nature can. So we say it is the number of neutrons that varies, and it varies in accordance with the atomic weight which is being observed. Suppose helium ka hi I gave example. So according to me, atomic mass of helium was 4. But in some cases we observe helium atom where the atomic mass of helium is 3. So that means in दोनों के अंदर number of protons is 2, but here number of neutrons is also 2, while here number of neutrons is 1. So such elements where atomic number remains the same but atomic mass changes are known as isotopes. Same case, uranium 92, one is 146 while another is 143. So that means in this case the number of neutrons are 3 less than this one. That's why they are showing the different atomic mass. So these elements are known as isotopes. So isotopes की definition will be, these are the elements having the same number of protons but having the different number of neutrons. So these are known as isotopes, and we are done with the topic of isotopes also. Clear? So our next topic is strong nuclear forces. Now see, we have a few types of forces in nature. First is gravity. We all know about it, right? Gravity or the gravitational force is known to be the longest ranged forces. The entire universe, see, gravity is very strong. Gravity has the highest range where it can act, and hence the entire universe is bound due to gravity only, right? But when we say gravity has a highest range, or gravity is very strong to bound the universe itself, but gravity is not strong as compared to short range forces. So these are the long range force. In the short range forces, we have, number one is electrostatic force. Number two is magnetic force. And third is nuclear force. I have written it in order wise only. So gravity has the longest range. Then when we come at our level, what are our ranges? So in our range, electrostatic force is the force between two charges, two charged particles. कोई भी मेरे पास आयन है या इलेक्ट्रॉन है, प्रोटॉन है, वो एक दूसरे को कितनी फोर्स के साथ they'll attract each other or they'll repel each other. Like similar charges will repel, whereas opposite charges will attract, but with what amount of energy or force. So these are electrostatic force. Then we have magnetic forces. We have a variety of magnets. One which will stick to these metallic surfaces like the board magnetic dusters, or we have two magnets which we are trying to repel each other, or when we keep playing with them. So when they have the similar poles together, they repel, whereas when they have opposite poles, they just get attracted towards each other and they stick with each other. So these are my magnetic forces. You can say that they have a very short range. You take two magnets, place them around 1 meter apart, they are not going to attract or repel each other. Also, it depends upon the size of the magnet. I am talking about the playing magnets. But when you bring them together around 10 centimeter or 15 centimeter, they start attracting or repelling, or they start impacting each other. So these are short range forces, and I am talking about centimeters. But the nuclear forces, I told you the size of atom is millimeters divided by 1 million. So basically nanometers tak they go. Nanometer is, which is 10 to power minus 9 meters. It is the size of the atom. Now you will get to know the size of nucleus. The average size of a nucleus is of the order of 1 femtometers, which is 10 to power minus 15 meters, right? So you can imagine 1 millionth time again the size of atom is my size of nucleus, right? So when I am talking about nucleus के अंदर there are nuclear forces which binds together these protons and neutrons with each other. Also, electron is negatively charged, proton is positively charged. So not only this nuclear force is binding these neutrons and protons together into the nucleus, but it is also preventing these protons from the electrostatic forces of electrons. Now you understand, nuclear force inside is stronger than electrostatic forces which is outside, because it is more closer to each other. So more we keep on going closer and closer, these forces will start acting. Also, if you ask what is the nature of these nuclear forces, the nature of these nuclear forces is explained in a better way when I draw an graph. So I'll say this is the y-axis where I represent the force, and this is my x-axis where I represent the distance, right? So we say when the distance is around, I'll say this is the range of femtometers, right? So I'm saying मेरी जो nuclear force है, it is preventing protons from getting attracted to electrons, and it is binding these nucleons all together. Nucleons is the combined name for neutrons and protons, and it is binding these nucleons together. But it should be such that this force, since it is so strong, it should not be such that it just combines these nucleons and make it a one thing. They should not get mixed up together. Neutrons and protons should be bound together, but they should have their own identity. So I say there is a range which is, I'll say 0.5 femtometer. Suppose this is the point where I'm talking. So I'll say to prevent the mixing up of neutrons and protons and crushing them together, the force below this range, if these particles go beyond this separation, they come more closer than this separation, this nuclear force will turn into repulsive, right? Once they go more closer than this separation, they'll start repelling each other. But once they are more than this range, I'll say this is attractive force. And once it is out of the this femtometer range, this force will tends to 0, right? When I'm saying tends to 0, any force in this universe is never 0. It always tends to 0. It always appears to go to 0, but it is never 0. So I'll say the positive side of y-axis will denote the repulsive force, we all know. So I'll say, suppose this is my 0.5 femtometers. So the force will, repulsive force, when I'm going towards this side, this force is increasing, and it is in the repulsive in nature. The more you go closer, more repulsive it will become. And when I am crossing this 0.5 femtometer, the more farther we are going, this force is increasing, but in a attractive manner. And when we are crossing this femtometer range, it starts appearing to tends to 0. So this is the nature of these strong nuclear forces. Below the 0.5 femtometer point, they start increasing but in a repulsive manner. Above this, they increase in an attractive manner, and when we cross this femtometer range, they just start tending to 0. So these are our short range or the shortest range strong nuclear forces. Also, it is said that nuclear forces are the strongest forces in the universe. If anyhow we could compare these forces at the same range, nuclear forces will dominate every other force. But since it is the shortest range, we say its you can say its impact or its contribution lies over this level, over this you can say structure only, and we are dealing with nuclear forces only around the nucleus, right? When the sun is emitting out particles, or there is a fission reaction taking place, that place nuclear reactions are coming into force, but they are very short range, so they are just in between 1 or 2 ions or 1 or 2 particles, right? So also the basic range, if you ask, this range is of 3 to 4 femtometers, above which it starts tending to 0, and below 0.5 it is repulsive in nature, and above 0.5 femtometer it is attractive in nature. So this is all about my strong nuclear forces. I hope it is clear. Also, before we move on to our radioactive decay topic, there is a very small topic which is known as the specific charge. This is just the mathematical concept. Specific charge is basically the ratio of charge to mass. So suppose if I have to calculate the specific charge of E, that will be the charge on electron is 1.6 into 10 to power minus 19 coulombs, and the mass of electron is 9.1 into 10 to power minus 31 kgs. Hence I get the specific mass, specific charge of electron will be, it will come out to be 1.75 into 10 to power minus 11, which is coulombs per kg. It is a mathematical concept, just pure ratio. And why do we need specific charge? Because many a times, suppose we are studying about some random element or an unknown element and we need to find its mass. So what we do is we calculate its specific charge and we know its charge due to electrons, and we use this ratio to find the mass of that element. So vice versa, we can calculate another quantities also. So it is purely basic mathematical concept. It's just a ratio, specific charges, charge divided by mass. I hope it is clear. And let's move on to our next topic, which is radioactive decay. So when we are talking about radioactive decay, that means we are talking about an element, about a nucleus which is highly unstable. That means the nucleus we are talking about is having a certain number of particles inside it, but due to these particles there is a huge amount of energy in this nucleus which is making it unstable and making it explode in basic language. So it can be a very big element having a large number of particles or electrons, or it can be as small as hydrogen or helium. And we have a both type of radioactive decay, which is fusion and fission. One is for higher number of electrons and one is for lesser number of electrons, and in both cases a huge amount of energy is being liberated, and also a large number of smaller particles are being liberated out, or we need these small particles to bombard these radioactive nuclei and to result into a new daughter nuclei and a few another elements. So basically radioactive decay can occur in three forms. One is alpha decay. Now alpha is basically helium टाइप का ये पार्टिकल है, एंड अल्फा इज 4 just like helium. It has a mass number of 4 and it has atomic number of 2. So whenever I am talking about radioactive decay through alpha particles, that means I have a parent nuclei whose atomic mass is A and atomic number is Z, and it decays into a daughter nuclei, which is, I am taking out an alpha particle, so I'll write an alpha particle is being released, and since alpha is carrying 4 units of mass, so I'll get A minus 4 and Z, I'll say Z minus 2 because I'm taking 2 out, and in this way I get the alpha decay. Right? So I'll say, suppose uranium, if uranium decays through alpha decay, uranium will release 1 or 2 or n number of alpha particles, plus depending upon what will be the total number of alpha particles emitted, and subtracting that atomic count from this uranium ka 92, I get the daughter nuclei, and of course some energy. Now energy can also be in the form of photons or bosons or neutrinos. These particles will come to know in this topic. For now we'll say a huge amount of energy is liberated out. So this is my alpha decay. Alpha decay results in decay of a unstable radioactive nuclei into some daughter nuclei plus alpha particles. What type of questions may come? They'll give you the specified parent nuclei and they'll tell 4 or 3 alpha particles are emitted out, find the daughter nuclei or give us the equation. So equation ho ya aapka example ho ya whatever, you have to calculate about the suppose the daughter nuclei. So the only way is the daughter Z atomic number of daughter nuclei will be atomic number of parent nuclei minus n number of alpha particles 2 times, because 2 atomic number carries alpha particles, so minus 2n and you get the atomic number of daughter nuclei. Same way you can calculate as A of Y will be A of X minus 4n, because mass number of alpha particle is 4, and this way you can calculate. And also suppose if you are given an equation or you have to write an equation, just make sure that these add up to the same quantity on both sides. So that way your equation is verified by your own, right? So this is your alpha decay. Next is beta decay. So when we are talking about beta decay, beta decay, so beta is basically one electron, we call it beta negative, right? So beta decay means when an unstable nuclei emits out an electron, we call it a beta decay. Now beta decay can be positive and negative both ways. It can be electron or a proton or a positron, and it will be beta positive, right? Now positron is basically antiparticle of electron which has the same nature but opposite charge, right? So P positive. And when does this beta decay happens? So we say unstable nuclei emits out beta negative or beta positive particles. Why? Because when inside the nucleus there is a huge amount of energy, so what happens? One neutron, which is electrically neutral, it gets converted to a proton, right? Neutron gets converted to a proton, and since it was electrically neutral and proton is positively charged, some particle must also be created to balance out this charge. So at this point, one beta particle is being created, and also to balance out the amount of energy which was present before and after, to make it conserved, we say one antiparticle is also liberated out. So in such cases, antiparticles I'll let you know here, don't worry. So here I am saying, so basically one neutron gets converted to a proton and a electron, and this electron is my beta particle, and when this is created, this beta particle which is also being created, it instantly emits out, resulting in beta decay, right? So this way the entire nucleus stays electrically neutral. Now this is beta decay. This is beta negative. In opposite way, if you ask where will be the beta positive decay, in that case it will be when one proton gets converted to neutron. This was positive, this is neutral. So I'll say one beta positive is created and one neutrino, and this is emitted out instantly. So this is the example of my beta decay. अब ये होता कब है? So beta negative decay happens when we have a huge number of neutrons as compared to protons, and this beta positive decay happens when we have a very small number of neutrons as compared to number of protons, because number of protons should be equal to number of electrons. We cannot change number of protons, but neutrons can vary, and hence to balance out the internal energies and internal structures, these equations or these incidents or these processes occur, and there is a beta positive or a beta negative decay, and it is emitted out, right? So this is my beta decay. In this case, if you ask the equation, it will be X AZ will result in the daughter nuclei plus beta negative if you are asking. So beta negative, beta is electron doesn't carry any mass, or you can say it carries negligible mass. So I'll say mass number remains unchanged, whereas Z will be plus 1. As I said, 0 minus 1 निकला है, so result will be plus 1, so Z will increase and this will be the equation, plus neutrino, right? रिवर्स बीटा पॉजिटिव अगर होगा तो यहाँ पर नेगेटिव हो जाएगा, यहाँ पॉजिटिव हो जाएगा, यहाँ न्यूट्रिनो आ जाएगा, right? So this is my beta decay. Now gamma decay, let's come to gamma decay. Before we move on to gamma decay, let's talk about particles and antiparticles. So what is an antiparticle? We say that we are living in a universe which is made up of particles. According to us, we are calling it particle. We can be antiparticle also. So basically there is a universe which was generated out of nowhere. Big Bang theory, everyone knows about it. Basic, everyone knows about it, that there was nothing and that this Big Bang happened and universe was created. So if you say, I'm saying out of 0, one thing is created, there must be something else also which should be created, so that when these two combine, it again ends to nothing. This is very basic, right? Mathematics के अंदर when we solve equation, we always say x है, let's say plus 1 and minus 1. So basically x remains unchanged. We are adding 1 and subtracting 1, so that when we add these two, we'll get x again. So the same way, universe was created out of nowhere and we are living in a universe. So we always say there must be a parallel universe out there somewhere which should be made up of antiparticles, right? Or maybe those who are present on that universe may be calling themselves as particles and calling us as antiparticles. So the basic rule is one is particle, one is antiparticle for sure. Now same way, since everywhere everything is made out of nothing, there must be an antiparticle for everything. For me, for Jannat is also another anti-Jannat, which when we'll combine, it ends to nothing, right? So this parallel universe which I am talking about is exactly same as ours, but of opposite you can say charge or some nature, so that when they combine, it just vanishes to nothing, right? So this is particle, this is antiparticle. So similarly, in physics or in chemistry or in science, whatever particles we are dealing with, say electrons, protons, right? Neutrons का नहीं रहते, neutrinos, then bosons, then photons. ऐसे जितने भी particles रहेंगे in science, we will always have their antiparticles. Electron का will be positron, proton का will be antiproton, neutrino का will be antineutrino. If it is positive, then it will be negative, antiboson. Gamma ka remains same, gamma, right? So in the same way, just like in a parallel universe where we have our anti-universe, universe plus anti-universe will combine and they'll vanish to zero. So same way, these particles and antiparticles, when they combine, they lead only energy, right? So we say, in case of gamma decay is basically why I am telling you so much before I go on to gamma decay, is because when we say just gamma decay, so with gamma decay we just mean that there is an unstable nuclei, I'll say unstable nuclei, that will decay into a stable nuclei with release of energy in the form of photons, and may be accompanied by, I'll write accompanied by alpha decay or beta decay. When we are only talking about gamma decay, we are only talking about this thing, that whenever unstable nuclei is decaying into a stable nuclei, there will be a release of energy which will be in the form of gamma rays or gamma radiations, and it may be accompanied with the alpha or beta particles. But this gamma, this photon itself is a very big topic, and it behaves or it interacts with particles or antiparticles in a wide number of ways. So to understand that, we must have knowledge about this thing. So for example, okay, before that example, gamma decay, simple gamma decay is this thing, then neutrino, antineutrinos, particle, antiparticle. Let's pick the topic of electromagnetic wave. Now, electromagnetic wave topics I have already covered in my previous videos under the playlist named Concepts of Physics. I'll also leave the link to that playlist in the description also, right? So you can very well go there and watch those videos. So I'll be very compact here. Now, electromagnetic wave is a very big topic, and light, when we are talking about light, we say light is a very small component of this EM wave. So EM wave is a wave which is traveling in a way that there is presence of electric and magnetic fields simultaneously perpendicular to each other and to the direction of propagation of a wave. Also, this electromagnetic wave travels, or you can say light, which is a component of EM wave, travels in the form of photons, and hence these photons travel in the form of electromagnetic wave. Clear? Where this electromagnetic wave, as I have done earlier also and explained also, this electromagnetic waves travel with the speed of light. And this is what? Light. Photon is packet of light. So this will travel with the speed of light. And if I need to calculate the wavelength of this electromagnetic wave, the formula would be C divided by frequency, where C is my speed of light. And F denotes the frequency. Frequency is also denoted by nu, but here we'll denote it by F since nu is used for the depiction of neutrinos and antineutrinos. So I'll write F. So this is the formula for wavelength of electromagnetic wave, which is moving with the speed of light and has the frequency F. Also, this EM wave, or the part of this EM wave which is a photon which is moving with the speed of light, it will always carry some energy with it, because everywhere gamma is coming, it's always related to the release of energy. So energy carried by the photon is given by HF, right? Speed of light C is 3.0 into 10 to power 8 meters per second, and energy is given by HF, where H is my Planck's constant, whose value is 6.67 into 10 to power minus 34, right? Clear? So its value is this, and the energy carried by a photon is HF. Now, I know about the wavelength, I know about the energy. Now comes photons. Also, you know that photon is moving with a very high velocity. It is also carrying a high amount of energy. So we say photon, which is a quanta of light, is always traveling with a very high speed and with a very high amount of energy. So the Einstein named these photons as flying needles. Why? Because these photons can penetrate through a very high density materials also with very ease, and hence just like a needle just passes through everything which comes in its way. So we say photons were also known as the flying needles, and this name was given by Einstein himself. So these flying needles can have a high range of energies also, depending upon, since energy is given by hf, so depending upon if the energy of these flying needles may vary, right? Now next topic is laser. We all know that laser is a very concentrated high intensity beam. So we say laser is a beam of high number of photons having frequency f, right? When I am talking about laser, that means I am using a beam of photons, that means a large number of photons which are moving with frequency f, and hence I'll say the energy of a laser beam, the energy of a laser beam is given by NHF. Since HF is energy of one photon and I am saying a beam of photons, so that means there is a large number of photons present here. So the total energy of the laser beam will be NHF, and this energy, since it is in terms of frequency, I'll say it is defined as the amount of energy passing a particular point per second, right? So we say when I am talking about laser power, so that means it is the amount of energy which is being transmitted through a particular point in a given second. So this will give me my laser energy and laser power, right? So now when we are talking about laser, one thing also comes into mind. We are making use of laser in medicine also. So there also the energy which we require for a laser to be used depends upon what is the target we are using it, or for what purpose we are using it. Like suppose if I'm using it in medicine, I need a particular amount of energy should be present to penetrate through the given sample, right? So why I was telling so much about the photons and the particle and antiparticle is because once we are finished with these topics, our next topic would be particle and antiparticle, their nature, how did they originate, and then after covering that topic we'll move on to interaction with particles and antiparticles. What are those interactions where particles are generated, and what are those interactions where antiparticles are created or generated? So for covering those topics you need to stay tuned, because for now, for today, this was all, and very soon we'll be right back with the further topics in which we'll cover further large number of topics and we'll explain every single basic about it. So till then, stay tuned. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.